Did you like Aquaman? Well, here are 3 more movies that you should watch. Number 1, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Although coming from the MCU side of the superhero world, this film shares in a lot of the same concepts, however executes them all much better. There's some serious heart underpinning the kingdom politics and succession storyline, and it also features Marvel's version of Atlantis, Talokan, led by Namor. Number 2, Furious 7. Previously known almost exclusively for horror movies, this film was James Wan's first foray into action blockbuster territory. Although it's not a superhero film in the traditional Marvel or DC sense, this movie still features plenty of dumb but entertaining physics-defying heroics. Number 3, Black Adam. Maybe you'd like to stick with actual superheroes, specifically within the DCEU. Black Adam is another DCEU film with an iffy story, but features a charismatic lead and a similar silly, serious tonal blend.